Suppose perhaps we should do something with these guys over here. Or maybe not. Maybe we let them be. We'll see. We'll see. I think today I'm going to start over here on this page. I'm working a lot with trees, practicing. And I think those nice, soft, organic forms are just relaxing. Last couple days have been a little trying. I've had some tough things happen, and I've tried as hard as I could to stay involved in my art. Unfortunately, I've been able to still get a little bit of timing each day. Sometimes the routine of a thing can be good when times are hard. Sometimes art itself can be good when times are hard. I know that for a lot of people, there is some therapy in art, or at least the potential for it. It's not been the case for me, but I'm an odd emotional creature sometimes, and I think it's pretty reasonable, very reasonable in fact, that art could be the solution or the cause for all kinds of emotional issues. It's such an emotional act, and even for myself, where I'm not a particularly emotional creature, the expectations that get tied up in creating are emotional for me. And I know a lot of people, a lot of students I had over the years, a lot of friends, that art can be something they delve into when times are hard. And there's been a lot of hard times lately. Not for myself in so much as just for the world. Times are hard. Maybe times are always hard. That's one of those things that's hard to dissect. Sometimes it's just hard. Existing in of its very nature can just be hard sometimes. I find that music is often a really beneficial and therapeutic thing for me. Playing music, sitting down on my guitar. I find drawing like this to be beneficial too. Drawing where there's not really any intention. I'm just kind of making marks. And although I don't have a whole lot of expectations, there's, just some pleasure, some simple pleasure in just making and just crafting and creating. It's getting close to springtime right now. And another thing, not that there's any connection to what I was just talking about, but another thing that brings me some hope and some therapy is just seeing that things are going to start growing. You can't see it right now, but I have a couple little plants behind me, these little fig trees that I've been nursing for several years now, and every once in a while they'll give me a fig or two, and I adore figs, but we cannot get them very often here in Colorado. It is not a frequent luxury that we get. And spring is almost upon us, and the green things are starting to come. The daffodils are a couple inches high. Tulips are starting to sprout in the backyard. And there is hope in springtime. There is hope in flowers, in watching things, little green things that can't help but reach towards the surface, towards sunlight, starting to come back. And there's hope in that, and there's therapy in that. And I am yearning so hard for the green. I'm so excited for things to start growing again. sometimes little animals can also be really beneficial for hope. We've got these kittens that we kind of adopted here in the last couple months. Right as winter was starting to set in, this cute white cat showed up on our front porch. Actually showed up in our backyard initially, and it was starving. You could see bones sticking out. And I am not a cat person by nature. Sorry to all of you out there who are cat people. I grew up allergic to them, and when you're a little kid and something makes you react like that, I think it's easy to just criminalize the thing. And that's what I did. I just thought cats were bad. I don't like cats. They make me sneeze. They make me feel like crap. But this little starving critter was in my garden, and I was upset. And I think I threw a tomato down by it just to shoo it. I didn't want to hit it. I don't really like to hurt anything I don't have to. But I threw a tomato down near it, and it kind of ducked away. And then the cat just cried. And pretty immediately I had the sensation that this is not an animal that's trying to poop in my garden or eat my birds or something. Like, there's something wrong here. And so I went inside and I think I just grabbed lunch meat, because I don't know anything about cats. I was like, well, they're carnivores, so can probably just eat some like deli meat. So I think I just got some deli meat, which I'm sure the salt content of which is terrible for cats, but better than starving. And I threw some down for it, and it devoured all the meat. And then a couple hours later, I kind of thought it was a one-off occurrence. A couple hours later, I opened the front door, and this cat's on our front porch, and I just kind of ended up befriending it and feeding it some cheese, doing a little bit of research, like, oh, they can eat eggs. So I scrambled the cat some eggs, and over the course of the next like 3 or 4 days, I just nursed this cat back to health with milk and rice and crappy little pieces of Kraft singles and scrambled eggs, and it's just not really left our property since. It lives now on our back porch. But ironically, for some reason, the cat started like bringing in friends. A couple days later, there was another cat, and then another one, and now there's 4 of them that kind of pseudo live on our property, and we live out in the country, and so it's a lot of space. But I've slowly learned how to deal with cats and how to pet cats, and again, just small forms of life that play and just sit there and nap in the sunspots and just exist as separate from us. I think it can sometimes just be invigorating. It can give you a sense of hope. These silly little cats that, I don't like cats. I'm not a cat person. Well, now I talk sweetly to them, and I go out and I feed them and make sure they've got water, especially when we have the terrible negative 20-degree days. You go out and tend these little critters and keep an eye on them, and they're sweet. And after I figured out how not to get bitten / scratched, because they do have razor blades underneath each of their fingers, it's been a pretty decent little relationship, and I'm enjoying this time with them, and it's something that I'm glad I relinquished my stubbornness, because they've been beneficial to us. Well, we've got big old dogs too, but there's something about the young ones. And the first cat we befriended, my daughter named Marshmallow. It's a white little cat. And Marshmallow is young, very young. And he still plays. We can look out in the back porch sometimes, and he'll be just running around with a little ball, batting it back and forth. He's very cute. And seeing that cuteness, that life there's some hope in that. My daughter brings a lot of that as well. She's 3.5 and having a little kid running around and just getting excited about all kinds of things that we as adults can sometimes be jaded to. That childlike joy is such a beautiful thing. And it gives hope. It gives hope in the dark times. Friends are good for this too. I went and I had lunch and a couple beers with some friends today, and it was just good. I'm very introverted and don't need a ton of social time, but when times are tough, it's beneficial. It's a good idea. And maybe especially a good idea if you don't feel like it initially, because sometimes when times are tough, it's easy to clam up. It can be easy for a lot of people to feel like they don't want to burden others with their junk. But the reality is your friends want to be burdened with your junk. Unless you're always the burden. But I find that that's often people that think that about themselves, they're often not the person that is the case with. The reality is your friends want to be there for you. They want to take care of you. And that social time is healing and beneficial. And even when times are just normal, which is hopefully for all of you very common, I'm really fortunate in that most of the time things are pretty chill, pretty solid. But even when times are normal, invest that time, because if it's good for you, there's a good chance that it's not great for somebody else. And even if it is, then goodness, be thankful for that and cash in on it and do the things that you can in that opportunity. Friends are such a valuable asset. And something that I try to remind myself frequently not to take for granted. It's so easy to just let friendships fall off, and what a terrible, terrible thing. What is going on in this drawing? One of these days I'll do some preps. Yeah. I'll do some prep before one of these sessions and I'll actually have something solid. But right now what you're seeing is my brain just sorting through these past couple days and just making some interesting tree things. I don't know what these are. Kind of enjoying myself. I don't know if anything's going to come of it other than that, but again, sometimes it's just fine to make things. I do a lot of drawings and paintings that have very definitive purpose, but I don't do this a lot. I just sit down and go. It can be beneficial too. I suppose if you did it all the time, it might be a problem, but every time I say something like that, I have the thought that, oh yeah, I think some people just act or just, do a thing and think about what they're going to do later. And I don't seem to be capable of not thinking about both sides of a thing when I start processing it. So maybe there is no downside to this. Maybe there are just some things that are fine to do. They're just normal, or not normal, but just generally beneficial. Maybe just drawing for the sake of drawing is universally a good thing. I don't know. Artists are weird. We're very weird creatures. We have these tendencies that are unique to us, these desires, I don't know. I spent 11 years teaching kids about art, teaching kids how to be artists. Obviously, in the high school classes where they were not required and kids were taking them via their own choice, most of the kids I taught were artistic in some capacity. Every once in a while you get kids that are there just because they think the class is going to be easy. Something that I abhorred and often got quite agitated about. Probably didn't need to. But I had those 11 years. They had 5 years of being at university in an art college with lots of weirdos. And I spent a lot of time in high school in punk bands, and there's a weird similarity between art folk and the punk kids. There's a certain countercultural movement. There's a certain, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and it doesn't matter what the world around me thinks sort of attitude. There is a desire to explore, a certain level of tolerance, an introspection, a level of analysis. A lot of these things that are just artistic in nature that are not ubiquitous things. They're not things that seem to be a part of all people. They seem to be a part of this weird branch of humanity that is artists. And I'm comfortable with it. I run into people every once in a while that they find those traits very, very odd. But, I mean, artists just are kind of odd. And I suppose odd by its nature, that term implies different than, and probably in some capacities less than. So maybe odd's not a great word to use for it, but artists are often counter to the current culture, to the current climate. And that's part of the benefit that they bring. But we're kind of weird. Kind of weird. If you're listening to this, there's a really good chance that you're one of those kids that was a little bit strange in high school. You didn't necessarily fit in with whatever the norm was at that particular location or that particular place. But you probably found your people, or you found a location. And goodness, if you didn't find your people, I'm sorry. Try to find some people in the comments here. Find some community, because there are a lot of people that are like you, just like you. But a lot of us, we found our community, and it was just this beautiful thing. We become a part of this group, a part of this family, this brotherhood, this sisterhood of like-minded weirdos that are making things and that love anime or card games or board games or a certain kind of video game. A lot of those things are more palatable nowadays to the parents. But when I was growing up, the anime club was rather clandestine. It was one of those things that you didn't necessarily want people to know that you participated in. And that seems to have gone away a little bit in the last couple of years. I remember for ages talking to my students about, every once in a while talking to my students about things like anime. There was just very few of them that had any understanding. It was still very niche. I don't remember really what series cut through all that, but at a certain point, anime kind of became more mainstream here in the US. I don't know if it's quite mainstream or if most of the kids I worked with were a little, geekier than normal. But again, I interacted with and taught all kinds of students, not just the art kids. And so if it had been really abnormal, I think I would have still noticed that. But yeah, when I was growing up in high school, anime was not... I don't know if I ever talked to my parents about it, because I think I was probably thinking, oh, they'll be really weird, or they'll probably be opposed to it because it's not American, because they don't understand it, because there's things that are represented in it that might be countercultural or against what our beliefs are. But I mean, I started reading anime. Not reading anime. There's going to already be somebody who's going to be upset about that comment. But hey, I'm drawn at the same time. I started reading manga pretty seriously at about 14, 15. Our local King Soopers, which is a grocery store chain, started carrying Shonen Jump way back in the day. And so I remember buying the first one, and it was, oh man, Naruto was not that far into serialization at that point. It was the Zabuza arc early on with Zabuza and Haku, and One Piece was in it as well. And I'm not sure if it was Baratier, like when they meet Sanji, There was another series that was present around that time called 666 Satan. That was this wonderfully crafted series about these like technological monstrosities that were inserted into people, and they had the ability to utilize their powers. A lot like the Bijou in Naruto. These like demons inserted into people, but it was a lot. I wouldn't say a lot more fleshed out, but it was just a very, very different vibe than that. It was a little bit more gruesome. The art style was quite different, but the series was amazing in that everything seemed to tie back in. And it was revolutionary. I read a ton as a kid. I watched a lot of stuff. I was always into sci-fi and fantasy. But getting my first taste of manga, and then we started watching Dragon Ball Z and things like that a lot. And then getting into anime, and all the time we spent in Zelda games, and then Halo. We fell in love with the lore. We fell in love with these series and these ideas. And it was life-changing. I mean, my wife has never engaged in any anime or manga of any kind, nor do I think she will. But she has sat through many conversations with me talking to her about the Marineford arc or a particular concept in some anime or manga, and just the beautiful storytelling. I think I probably retold a huge portion of Full Metal Alchemist to her at some point, which is another wonderful series that we read back then, and then it seems like it went on hiatus for a long time. But there were just these wonderful stories, and it felt amazing. It felt like when, like Van Gogh's artwork started to take on these Japanese aspects, because at that point the Japanese woodcuts were starting to come into Europe, and it kind of felt like that to me in an individual basis, which was all of a sudden I'm getting this influx of Japanese technology and Japanese ideas, and it was invigorating. And I had this weird merger of Tolkien and Star Wars and anime and manga that became these linchpins in my creativity and in the stuff that I really enjoyed at that time. If I go back to sketchbooks from that period in time, I'm going to find a lot of Dragon Ball Z. At some point on here, I'm sure that I will do a sketchbook tour, but I'm going to do some old sketchbook tours. I'm going to do some from my middle school and high school sketchbooks. And it's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be a little weird, I'm sure. And I don't think I'm going to go through them ahead of time. If I had to edit something out, I could do that. That's not a problem. But I don't think I will go through them ahead of time, because I want the reactions to be genuine. And there's going to be a lot of laughing, I'm sure. It's going to be plenty of things where it's like, well, I'm kind of embarrassed that I drew that. Or that arm looks really terrible. But, I mean, that's just the reality. I don't know any artist that can look back on their work from, 2 years ago and be super confident in it. And for... Sorry. For me, I'll be going back, in some cases, 20 years. And I've got them. Well, I did. Oh, there it is. The box is underneath my desk right now, of all these old sketchbooks. Just waiting for us to get into them and see what dormant monstrosities or beautiful things lie there. I'm also kind of excited about the idea of looking back at some of those things and maybe doing modern versions on it. Modern versions of them. Some of that would be kind of fun to get into. I think it could be really interesting to see what my younger self was delving into and then rebuild it. I've always had really well thought out, that sounds really humble. I've always had very well thought out ideas. I've always had a lot of ideas, and I have a tendency to overthink everything in my life, and so I have a tendency to flesh them out, I think, pretty well, pretty efficiently. So it's fun and nostalgic and always a little disheartening to go back through old work. There's always a piece of me that is kind of internally dialoguing along the line of, man, why didn't you keep this up? You know, if you just kept drawing, if you'd kept working, like, think of where your artwork would be now. You're still drawing these stupid tree things, and you don't know what you're doing, and I think a lot of us have that internal dialogue. But when I go back and look at some of these things, sometimes it's hard. Because sometimes I look at drawings from a decade ago, and I'm like, that's better than I can do now. What have I been doing? That's not efficient. It's not good. It's not something that you should do. And yet I'm not sure how you don't. I think it's one of those things that you kind of, you recognize that feeling. You hold it in your hand for a moment and you let it go like a butterfly. I know there's no benefit to me sitting there and thinking about and wondering what could have been. Because what could have been isn't, and it wasn't. It's inefficient. And it's still beneficial to recognize those emotions and those feelings. But after you've acknowledged them, I think it's beneficial to let it go. And then, I mean, I'm telling this to myself too. I want to be better than I am. I want to be able to draw things from my mind. But I'm not that good at it. I'm going to have to work on it. And I'm okay with that. Intellectually, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the amount of time it's going to take. I'm okay with the effort that's going to go into it. But I'm impatient. Dreadfully impatient. Impatience is an important thing to work on. I just noticed that I was starting to make a different kind of hatching over here than I did anywhere else. I was like, let's go with the longer strokes again. It's kind of more what we've done throughout everything else. Is it better? I don't know. What does better mean in this circumstance when I don't have any real predefined goal about what I'm trying to represent here? There's kind of like, what is this? This is a moon of some kind with two thorny things going after it. Who knows what this thing is? Who knows what that thing is? Goodness. I wonder how much of that's going to happen as we move through this sketchbook. There's going to be thing after thing after thing. It's going to be, what is that? I don't know. Not sure what Zach was thinking when he built this guy. But looking back on your old art, it's an interesting thing. It's beneficial, but it can be tricky. Especially if you've declined. If your artwork used to be of a higher caliber than it is now. I certainly look back at some things and like, well, I couldn't do that anymore. But there are other things that I've worked on that are better. I can think about things and wrap my head around them three-dimensionally in my head a lot better than I used to be able to. And I think that's kind of the start of learning how to draw from imagination, is instead of memorizing how to draw a tree or a cloud or a rock or a mountain, it's understanding what it is, understanding how it exists in three-dimensional space, understanding that if I want there to be a little divot here, that the shading is going to come from the light's coming from this way, and so it's going to cast this tiny little shadow there. It's going to cast a little bit of a shadow over here if this surface is going that way, but not here, because this, as I'm thinking about it right now, I think this is going to be open space. So See if we can bring this root down, even though I kind of technically ended it up there. I can come here in the shadows and pull it down. No one will know, except for you guys who are listening, right? Nobody's going to care at all. Maybe there is nobody. No one exists. Used to spend a lot of time thinking about concepts like what is art, particularly while I was teaching. I think sometimes it's fun to have these academic mental struggles, and it's good for conversation. I still do the gymnastics sometimes, just in my brain processing, like, what is this? What am I doing? What is art? Why do we do this? I think it's difficult to come to an answer. Very difficult to come to some kind of solid answer about what this is and why we have to do it. But I think those are very, very different things. I have to create things. If I went to sleep today without making something, I would be worse for it. I certainly don't always want to make things, but I pretty much always have to make things. There's a certain piece of logic in that that's like, well, if I have to make things, I might as well make things that I like. I might as well make things that look decent. And that alone maybe is enough of a reason to work on getting more proficient at the skills. But mostly I've got these stories and I've got these ideas that I think will probably gnaw at me until I die if I don't find a way to get them out. And I'm either going to get them out by developing the skills myself or by paying someone else to do it. And I'm not sure that I care. But I've got a lot of experience with art and with teaching art, and I know that by investing time into it, I can improve and I can get to a better point. The jury is still out on whether I will be able to get to the level that I want to. I would say probably not, because I have that curse as an artist that I don't think my level of proficiency will ever be what I want it to be. And I'm coming to terms with that, but I'm also continuing to see improvement. I haven't gone through a week or two where I have focused on growth and have seen none. I think every single week that I have put specific time into practicing and to progressing, I don't think there's been a single one that I have seen no improvement. And as long as that persists, I will continue to move forward. And even if that doesn't continue to persist, I will probably just bang my head against a wall anyway, because I have to. Because these ideas are going to just sit there and gnaw away at my soul until they are out in the world, until I give birth to them. And so, here we are. Here we are. It's not such a bad place to be. At least the view's good. Hope that you guys are sitting and drawing something. Maybe it's going better than mine is. Maybe you know what you're doing. Maybe you had a plan when you sat down. Maybe not. Maybe you're just making things too. I'm curious to know what you guys are up to. What you're doing while you're listening to this. It'd be really fun, I think, to get a group together in a Discord or something like that and just have little fun get-ups where we draw together. Or where we have monthly or weekly little challenges. Draw a tree that gives birth to people. Draw a robot that controls the weather. I used to do warm-ups like that for my students in class. Just random things that would pop into this weird mind of mine. I'm getting tired. I think it's about time to call it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that it's been beneficial to you. I hope that you're listening and making art of your own while I ramble nonsensically, whatever the word is that I'm searching for there. I hope it's been beneficial for you. I think it's been good for me. But it is late right now. And I fear I need some sleep. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.